Today you will learn the astonishing story of a veteran Vatican priest who, after suffering a cardiac arrest, went through a near-death experience that revealed terrifying secrets about the future of the Church, the emergence of a false prophet, and the presence of the Antichrist already acting among us. Father Henry had dedicated his entire life to faith, until the day he saw from the other side that the truth he served was slowly being corrupted. A narrative of revelations, apocalyptic visions, and an urgent call to those who still have eyes to see. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any episodes, and comment below the city you are watching us from. Let's go together on this spiritual journey, until the end. My name is Henry Lefebvre. I was ordained a priest at the age of 25, and spent more than half of my life within the silent walls of the Vatican, believing that I was serving the purest expression of the Christian faith. I studied the scriptures, handled secret documents, confessed sinners, and celebrated masses under the stained glass windows of St. Peter's Basilica. For decades, I thought my heart was aligned with heaven. But it was only when my own heart stopped beating that I truly saw not what I was taught, but what God wanted me to know. And since then, my life has never been the same. I always found it strange how time seemed to stand still within the Vatican. Perhaps it was the architecture, those cold marble walls, the silent corridors, where my steps echoed like forgotten prayers. Perhaps it was the weight of history, of eternal decisions that seemed to have been made long before I was born. Or perhaps it was the way routine imposed itself on us priests, like a liturgy that tolerates no doubts. My name is Henry. I am 62 years old, since 16. When I entered the seminary in Lyon, my life was consecrated to the Church. I dedicated myself to studies, to the scriptures, to ancient languages, and to the documents that have rested for centuries in the secret archives of the Vatican. I was faithful as a man can be to something he believes to be greater than himself. I lived in a small room within the sacred walls, waking every day at 5 a.m. to pray. Then came a simple breakfast in the refectory, followed by hours of work in the document conservation offices. My position allowed me access to rare texts, manuscripts with papal seals, ancient correspondences, and treaties that never saw the light of day. It was a privilege, or so I thought. In recent months, something changed. It was subtle, like a shiver running through the body for no reason. I noticed meetings were happening behind closed doors, even at unusual times. Men I had known for decades whispered among themselves, averting their eyes when I approached. Previously accessible files were sealed again. I started receiving instructions to review seemingly unimportant documents. Lists of names, transfers, specific passages of the scriptures. But there was something there. A hidden movement, as if a great decision was being made in the shadows. On certain days, I felt a weight on my chest that was not physical. It was as if the very air within the basilica carried a secret. I began having strange dreams, corridors extending into infinity, doors leading nowhere, bells ringing alone in the night. In one of these dreams, I saw the dome of St. Peter collapse. I woke up in a cold sweat but attributed everything to fatigue and my long hours of vigil. I never questioned faith, never doubted the Church, but something inside me began to whisper, a silent discomfort, like a flickering candle before it extinguishes. Little did I know that what would follow would not only shake my belief but transform everything I understood about faith, truth, and the very destiny of humanity. It was an ordinary night. Or it should have been. The corridor lights had already been turned off. Only my small desk lamp remained, casting a yellowish light over the manuscript I was reviewing. It was a strange document from the oldest archives, an apocryphal passage attributed to a forgotten prophet, written in ancient Greek. It spoke of an empty throne, of a lamb dressed in a wolf's skin, and a light shining at the center of lies. Those words caused me discomfort, but I continued. It was my duty. Suddenly, a sharp pain crossed my chest. I thought it was just muscle tension, but in seconds the pain intensified like a hot blade piercing my heart. I tried to get up, but my legs failed. The room spun. The world seemed to distort. I fell to my knees. My face touched the cold stone floor, and it was there, among forgotten files and whispers of ancient prophecies, that my breath ceased. But my consciousness did not. It was as if I was both inside myself and outside myself at the same time. I saw my body motionless, fallen like a useless burden on the library floor. I tried to scream, but there was no sound. I tried to move, but there was no body. It was just me, floating, suspended between life and something greater. The surroundings began to dissolve. The walls, the books, the very light, everything dissolved like smoke carried away by the wind. In its place emerged a vast, formless space. It was neither dark nor light. There was no floor nor ceiling. It was a nothingness filled with a presence. I felt time unravel. There, a second lasted 1,000 years, and 1,000 years were just a breath. My mind tried to resist. It sought references, logic, anything to understand what was happening. But in that space, reason was useless. Language seemed like a child's toy before the grandeur surrounding me. Then I began to be pulled, not violently, but firmly, as if invisible hands guided me through veils of reality. Each veil I passed brought a different sensation, peace, then fear, then love, then judgment, until at the end I was cast before something indescribable. A vast hall made of pure light emerged before me. I did not walk, only was carried, and in that echo-free space, I felt I was no longer alone. I felt eyes on me, presences, beings, entities waiting for me with an intensity that pierced my soul like fire and mercy, and it was there that I saw them for the first time. The 13 radiant beings, silent, incomprehensibly beautiful, and strangely familiar. Death was not the end. It was the beginning of a deeper judgment than I could ever have imagined. They were there, motionless, like pillars of conscious light. 13 beings. Each emanated a distinct luminosity, not with the colors we know here, but with living vibrations. The gold pulsed like wisdom. The deep blue seemed to contain the lament of the oceans. The purple vibrated as an echo of pain and healing at the same time. And the white? The white was an absolute presence, almost unbearable in its purity. They did not have faces like ours, but I understood them. Not through words, but a soundless language where each thought was conveyed directly to my essence. They knew everything, my past, my fears, my intentions, even those I hid from myself. One of them stepped forward. Its glow was silver, and there was a magnetism in its presence that made me instinctively recoil, not out of fear, but reverence. It did not speak. It just looked inside me, and at that instant, I relived every moment of my clerical life. I saw myself kneeling in confession. I saw the hands I blessed, the eyes of the faithful who heard me preach, the baptisms, the weddings, the farewells. But I also saw the moments I served more to the institution than to the truth. The times I feared to question when I kept silent before absurdities, when I chose obedience to the system over compassion for conflicted souls. Then it spoke, or rather, its thought pierced me. You served the house, but forgot the owner. Those words devastated me. They came not with condemnation, but with a clarity impossible to ignore. I had confused the structure with the essence, religion with truth, the altar with God. The other beings remained silent, but it was as if they all participated in the revelation. One of them, with a soft red light, showed me an image, the throne of the Vatican, but it was empty, and above it floated a shadow that smiled. The golden being then showed me the next phase, the election of a new pope. But something was wrong. The process was rushed, as if it was already orchestrated. The name of the chosen one did not come from prayer but from underground agreements. When the new pope was revealed, I felt something cold pierce my soul. "He is not what he seems," said the blue being. "It is the beginning of the great inversion." Next, a dark presence appeared behind that new leader. Tall, elegant, almost hypnotic. Its eyes glowed like burning coals. The silver entity spoke again. "The false prophet precedes the messenger of the lie. And you were brought here to witness, for your mission is not yet over." I tried to understand. I tried to deny. But the more I resisted, the more I felt the weight of an ancient truth. Buried under centuries of dogmas, deception was approaching, and few would be able to perceive it. The light of the hall broke like a shattered stained glass, and I was thrown into another vision. I was no longer floating in that space between worlds. Now, I was walking, or at least felt like I was, through the corridors of the Vatican, but they looked different. Empty. Cold. As if time had moved forward and something sacred had drained from there. The conclave doors were ajar. The white smoke had already risen. A new pope had been chosen. But as I approached, I felt a repulsion I had never experienced there before. Voices were muffled, distorted. Priests and cardinals whispered, exchanged complicit glances, like conspirators in a war chamber. I saw the face of Francis. He was lying down, pale, his eyes half open, as if his soul was already saying goodbye. There was sadness there, not for death, but for what would come after it. In the center of the hall, the new pope emerged before the people. His arms open, a serene smile. He spoke of peace, inclusion, love, beautiful words but empty. I missed something. And soon I realized. He did not mention Christ. No cross. No reference to sacrifice, redemption, eternity. It was a message made to please everyone, but not the truth. I saw documents being secretly burned, gospel passages being suppressed, the catechism rewritten. And I saw leaders of other religions and heads of state applauding, surrendering to the new doctrine, as if it was the answer to all of the world's pains. But that was not faith. It was control. The vision expanded beyond the church walls. The world seemed to spin too fast. I saw the Euphrates River dry up to a cracked stone bed. I saw waters red as blood cover coastal cities. I saw deserts blanketed with snow, and in the center of Jerusalem, an altar being erected, not for God but for something demanding sacrifice. The sensation was of urgency, of agony, as if the very planet was screaming. I then returned to St. Peter's Square. A huge crowd gathered, waving flags, chanting words of hope. On the balcony above, the new pope blessed the people. Beside him, a man in white, but it wasn't the pope. It was him. The same I saw in the presence of beings. The piercing gaze, the charming smile, the irresistible aura. A world leader, charismatic, revered, and behind his gestures of love and unity lurked a hungry force, the Antichrist. I felt his gaze cross time and space as if he saw me. And at that moment, I understood. That was not a distant prophecy. It was the start of an ongoing plan, and I had been permitted to see, to later remember. The last image I saw before being pulled from that place was the crowd kneeling before the lie. And then, silence. Not the kind of silence that calms, but the one that screams. An absolute void, where even God seemed absent. It was in this void that I felt a force pulling me. Fast, brutal, like an inverted thunder. My soul was sucked back with an impact that made me wish I had never left the body. And then I opened my eyes. Lights, rushed voices, the continuous sound of a machine beside me. I was in a Roman hospital. A nurse shouted, something. Doctors ran. Everyone seemed astonished. One of them held my hand while the other murmured almost in shock. He came back. After nearly 20 minutes without a heartbeat, my mouth was dry, my chest burned, but it was as if my body was just a shell. Inside, I was different. Something had been opened, or perhaps removed, during that crossing. I spent days in the hospital under observation. They said I had a heart attack, but for some reason survived. The tests showed inexplicable signs. The heart had stopped, yes, but there was no damage, as if death had just passed through me, without truly touching me. The following days were the loneliest of my life. The following days were the loneliest of my life. I returned to the Vatican, but everything seemed different, not for the physical changes, but because now I could see. And what I saw was a castle about to crumble. I tried discreetly sharing what I experienced with a trusted bishop. His eyes widened. He listened to the end. And finally, sighed and said only, certain visions must remain silent, Henry, for everyone's safety. But how to silence what was engraved on the soul? I began writing, pages upon pages. I awoke in the middle of the night with sentences burning inside of me. I saw symbols repeated in ancient documents that once seemed irrelevant. I perceived connections previously escaping my understanding, and a certainty grew in my chest. I had been sent back, not to continue as before, but to warn. Yes, warn. The faithful, those still seeking. Those who feel in their hearts that something is wrong but cannot explain it. The truth was being distorted. Faith turning into theater. Behind the stage, the author of the farce already prepared for his triumphant entry. I was no longer just a priest. I was a witness. And witnesses cannot remain silent. The first time I tried to preach about what I had seen, I used careful words. I spoke about spiritual vigilance, the danger of deception, the necessity of returning to the living Christ, not to the political Christ or the symbol manipulated by power structures. But the eyes in the chapel benches turned to me with strangeness, some with pity, others with discomfort. After the Mass, a fellow priest called me aside. "Henry, what's happening to you?" His voice was tender, yet paternalistic. "You've always been a rational man. Why start now with these apocalyptic ideas?" I wanted to respond, wanted to say it wasn't an idea. It was a vision, no more than that. It was a call. But I saw in his eyes the same I saw in the bishop's. Fear, not of the vision, but of the disorder it could cause. I realized then that no one wanted to know, not even those who claimed to wait for signs, because the signs were arriving, and no one wanted to let go of their certainties to see them. Invitations for celebrations got smaller. The meetings I participated in were canceled or rearranged. My access to certain archives was revoked. Then one day, I received a letter from the very secretary of the Curia, a polite request for me to take a spiritual rest period, a disguised exile. I returned to my hometown, a forgotten village in the hills of France where everything seemed frozen in time. It was as if the world around me hadn't changed, but inside me, everything had exploded. I began walking along trails in the countryside, in silence. I talked to God, or tried to. Sometimes I felt his presence. Other times, only the echo of my voice. I reviewed my childhood, my vocation, my vows, asked myself if I had gone insane, if all that was just a delusion between life and death. But then, the dreams returned. Dreams with numbers. 13, 666, 3 days of darkness. Dreams with the new leader, now before global assemblies, acclaimed as the unifier of religions. I saw flags lowered. I saw crosses replaced with hybrid symbols. I saw a new liturgy being rehearsed, one without repentance, sin redemption, only celebration of a generic love, empty of truth. In all those dreams, I was always outside, watching, shouting. But no one listened. That's when I understood. My mission was not to convince those in power, but to shout in the desert. Speak to those who have ears, even if they are few. A single awakened heart is worth more than 1,000 sleeping. Because when the lie is fully enthroned, it will be too late to wake up. It started with a news report I heard on the radio while having coffee on that gloomy morning. A reporter with an urgent voice said that the Euphrates River was drying at an alarming rate. What seemed like just a water crisis in the Middle East chilled me to the bone. That image, the dry riverbed, stones exposed like ancient world's bones, I had seen before. There with the 13. In the following week, another alert. Fish mysteriously die in European rivers that turned red like blood. The media called it an environmental phenomenon. I knew what it was, a call, a seal breaking. The visions didn't stop. What frightened me the most wasn't what I saw in dreams, but what I read in newspapers. A series of faux attacks and demonstrations resulted in an announcement. A new altar will be built in Jerusalem, uniting all religions. The speech seemed inspiring and conciliatory, but it was exactly what was revealed to me. An altar with no name for worship without truth. A stage for the grand farce. The new pope, now consolidated, began visiting countries with an almost supernatural presence. People wept at seeing him. Atheist leaders knelt. News channels treated him like a modern savior, not of the soul but of humanity. He spoke of a new spirituality, overcoming old dogmas, and the need to rewrite the scriptures for new times. The cross was disappearing from pulpits. Words like sin and salvation became taboos. It was a religion that embraced all, but healed none. The man in white appeared beside him. No longer backstage, in a worldwide event broadcast live, they took the stage together. People shouted their names as if they were living legends. When he, the second man the other, took the microphone, I felt something in the air, like reversed electricity. His voice was sweet. His voice was sweet. His look penetrated the screen as if looking directly at me, and I knew. It was him. The same the 13 had shown me. The Antichrist, disguised as peace, clothed in charisma, applauded as hope. While he spoke, a white aura enveloped his body. But my eyes, now open, saw beyond. Behind the artificial light, there was deep darkness. Something ancient. Something hungry. Most shocking, people didn't see, cried, got emotional, surrendered. And there I was, isolated in the countryside, with an old radio and an open Bible in my hands, realizing that the prophecy wasn't coming. It had already begun. After that broadcast, I spent 3 days in silence, without leaving, eating, almost sleeping. It was as if time had stopped again. But now inside me, everything was clear. What was once prophecy had become present, and there was no return. In the scriptures I knew by heart, anti-symbolic passages now took form before my eyes. The man of iniquity will sit on the throne, presenting himself as God. Many will be deceived, even the elect. Why didn't anyone see? That was the question hammering me more forcefully than all the visions. Why didn't those in faith reading the same texts, preaching vigilance, now applaud deceit? Then I realized, a more painful truth than all. The Antichrist wouldn't need to impose anything by force. He wouldn't arrive with weapons or shouts. He'd come with smiles, with false compassion, with kindness that removes the cross, eliminates repentance's pain, transforms faith into an emotional, harmless product. It was too perfect to be true. The great battle wouldn't be fought between armies, but within the human spirit. Between accepting a painful truth or embracing a comfortable lie, I started receiving letters. People who somehow heard echoes of what I said in small sermons, or found texts I began publishing anonymously. Some said, "I feel something is wrong but can't explain." Others spoke of similar dreams to mine. Churches empty of presence, leaders with overly bright eyes, a distant sky. I'm not alone. They're few but awakening. Simple folks, mothers, youth, humble pastors, marginalized religious. They have no power nor voice in big pulpits but have eyes, and they're seeing. Then another kind of war began, spiritual, mental. My thoughts came under attack. Doubts, internal accusations, past memories, fragilities never shaken me now emerged like demons trying to silence me. One day, I almost gave up. I knelt in the improvised chapel at the chalet where I now live, and screamed silently, "Lord, if this mission is yours, why am I so alone?" Silence lingered for a time, but that night a breeze crossed the window, and I knew, not in words, but presence, I am with you, until the end of times. I stood up. The enemy had revealed itself. The church had been infiltrated. The world applauded darkness disguised as light. But I wasn't brought back to life to remain silent. The battle begins now. I woke up that day as one aware that something decisive was going to happen. The sky was strange. A dense silence lingered over the village, as if the world itself held its breath. I looked at the wooden cross above the door, feeling a weight on my chest that wasn't fear. It was responsibility. I grabbed my coat, the old backpack with manuscripts, vision excerpts, notes accumulated since the hospital, portable radio, the Bible, the one I've carried since seminary, now worn, loose pages, but alive as never before. I descended to the central square. It was market day. People passed with bags discussing bread prices, the missing rain, the new speech by the Pope to be broadcast that afternoon. "He'll announce the creation of the Global Faith Council," said an old man. "Finally, religion will cease dividing," completed a smiling woman. I felt a knot in my stomach. Breathed deeply, climbed a small stone step, calling attention like a medieval madman. "Listen, please. Just for a minute." Some stopped. Others laughed. Children pointed. I knew how I appeared. An exiled old priest with sunken eyes and trembling voice, but I continued. Spoke of the cross, Real sacrifice, what it means to love truth even when it hurts, beauty of repentance, humility before God, and the difference between living faith and manipulated religion. Some laughed. Others were uncomfortable. But a woman cried. Then a young man lowered his head. And then a child, perhaps 9 years old, approached and asked, "Father, is God still going to win?" I knelt before her, looked into her eyes, and answered without hesitation. He already won. We simply forgot that. That afternoon, I turned on the radio. The new pope spoke of unifying all beliefs in a single symbolic altar, without crosses, without dogmas, without distinctions. All would be welcome, provided they left behind the outdated idea of salvation. And beside him, smiling, stood the man in white. At that moment, I felt something burn inside me. It wasn't anger nor despair. It was fire. A fire coming from afar, not producible by human hands. The same fire burning in the hearts of prophets, martyrs, those daring to say no when the whole world said yes. I'm nobody. An old man. A forgotten priest. A man who died for a few minutes, but that's enough. Because just one speaking truth is sufficient to challenge an empire of lies. Today, I write these words calmly. As one no longer fearing death, after all, I've crossed it. What I found wasn't an end, but a beginning. A revelation burned through all human certainties, leaving something far more powerful in its place. Truth. Yet truth hurts. It doesn't please crowds. Doesn't fill auditoriums. It isn't palatable or comfortable. It demands surrender. That's why few embrace it. I return to life, not by chance, but purpose. Not to return to the pulpit, but to speak to those feeling an unnamed pressing in their chest. An unease with the world. A sadness from within. A sigh longing for something greater than this performance of promises. The church I knew, made of stone, gold, and tradition, is being corroded from within. Sacred symbols being emptied. The cross turned decorative accessory. The anticipated servant was swapped for one self-serving. The Antichrist already walks among us, not with horns, but charisma. Not with declared hatred, but with a false light that blinds instead of illuminating. Yet there's something untouchable. The spark, this secret, discreet flame, pulsing in the hearts of those still loving truth. Those who kneel in the silence of a room, crying while reading the Gospels, refusing to negotiate the essential. This spark is resistance. No matter how great the shadow, the smallest candle is still light. If I died that night, my life would have been just another within the ecclesiastical structure. A servant of the institution, an obedient man. But for some divine reason, I was allowed to see, to return different. Now I know my role is not to please, but to warn. If you've listened this far, it's because something within you still pulses with truth. Perhaps you are tired, confused, lost amidst this avalanche of deceit, masked by affection. But stay attentive. The divine voice doesn't exult. It whispers. He continues to communicate. In breaking bread, in ignored verses, in the midnight silence, in a child's gaze. Even if the structure collapses, the temple desecrated, the majority kneeling before the false, the promise persists, and you shall know the truth. And the truth shall set you free while it is still day. Wake up. The time for neutrality is over. It is day. Wake up. The time for neutrality is over.